Thank you. So let's hear it again for Frederick Green. So this month, we're looking at the chapter in The Soul of the Pilgrim called The Practice of Embracing the Unknown. By the way, we do have more of those passports, the study guides. If you're interested in them, you can pick them up in the lobby after the service. But one of the things that we need in order to embrace the unknown, as we talked about last week, is a solid foundation. When we have a solid foundation, whether it comes from our community or family, or particularly from God and from the divine, when we have a solid spiritual foundation and practice, it helps us withstand the storms of life. Jesus said, build your house upon a rock, and then when the storms come and the waters rise, you'll be stable. And if you build your house upon the sand, when the storms come and the waves hit, it'll collapse. So one of the ways that we build that solid foundation is through our spiritual practice. And the truth is that when we embrace the unknown, we can be pioneers and leaders in the area of our own expertise, in the area of our talent, whether it's art or teaching or leading a company or being a good parent or grandparent. One thing that we do when we embrace the unknown is we do it differently, probably. We do it in a way that hasn't been done before, because embracing the unknown calls for us to go to the edges of things and to see things before others and to know things before it becomes the norm or conventional wisdom. All right, so question. So how many of you feel like you were the oddball in your family, or you were just like way different from everyone else in your family and in your community? Look around a little bit, right? Yeah. And then how many of you were able to bring that different perspective or that new awareness or new way of doing things back to your family and your community, and it was received well? Nobody. Okay. And how many had to leave because the gap was too wide, or you just let it go and said, talk about the weather and nothing else, let it go at that? Well, the truth is you're in good company, because even Jesus had this issue. He definitely was someone who embraced the unknown and lived on the edges of things and changed how we think about things. You know, he said, the conventional wisdom was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And he says, hey, you need to love your enemies as yourself. But I love this story. It's found in the book of Mark, chapter 6, when he goes home to visit. And it says, Jesus left there and he went to his hometown, and he was accompanied by the disciples. And when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things, they asked. What's the wisdom that has been given him? What are those miracles that he's performing? And then it was sort of like, hey, wait a minute. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's kid? Isn't that James's brother? I went to school with them. Isn't that Joseph's brother and Simon? And aren't these his sisters over here? And they took offense at him. And an interesting thing began to happen. Jesus couldn't do anything in his hometown. He couldn't heal, he couldn't teach, everything just sort of fell flat. And Jesus said a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. And he could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. So what's interesting is, I think it calls for us that when we begin to think differently, or when we're sort of on practicing the unknown and on the edges of things, that if we don't leave, if we don't separate ourselves, the question is, does that consciousness that we were locked in keep us back? Does it keep us there? Because, we affect each other, right? Our thoughts and our opinions affect each other. And if we don't step out away from our families or whatever it is that's held us there, it can be more difficult for us to make a change. So when we live on the edge of things, we are border dwellers. And border dwellers are pioneers that call into manifestation something that hasn't been seen or known before. Again, the example, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, love your enemies as yourself. Einstein was a border dweller. The Beatles were border dwellers. John Coltrane, Gloria Steinem, Rosa Parks. I mean, the list really is endless. We've been blessed with border dwellers in the millions, probably. And Christine Walters-Patner, who wrote the book The Soul of the Pilgrim, said that the inner artist seeks to give form to our inner language and create beauty in the world. Both the inner monk, hear that, the inner monk and the inner artist are border dwellers. Neither fit neatly into mainstream society, as they both call us into new ways of seeing. So there are border dwellers in science, in medicine, in art, in technology. And also I wanted to stop for a minute and acknowledge the passing of Paul Allen, right? I mean, he and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, I mean, they transformed how the world is. And so we just take a moment to bless him as he continues his journey in life, and just with gratefulness for all that he has given, particularly to Seattle. So there are also mystical border dwellers like Yogananda and Sivananda, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the Holmes brothers, and they saw and experienced a sense of oneness and awe with God, and then they brought it into form so that we could emulate it. Now, we've been renewing a bit of our history, especially around the construction of this building, and last week we heard the story from our founders about how this building was built with love and attention and intention. So Mariah, if you would drop the screen and load up the video so that I can introduce this next one. So you're going to hear from three people. One is Marge, who was on the staff for probably 35 years, and she's going to tell the story of the stones that are in the fountain, which isn't a fountain, but it's a pond, which is not a pond, but you'll get the idea. It used to be. And we're going to hear from Ruth, who was part of the prayer ministry of the church. And then we're also going to hear from a man named Roy Layton. As a bit of trivia to answer the question, have you ever wondered how those pews got up into the balcony? I mean, you see how heavy these pews are? And there's a plaque to him on the door going out to the garden, Roy Layton. And his daughter was one of my classmates in ministerial school. So, Mariah, if you could start that.
At the time that we were moving into this church, well, as you all know, there's a balcony. And if you take a look at the size of the benches that had to go upstairs, no way to ever get them up the stairwell, so there's only one way: heave-ho, up and over, with a team up above, team down below, the smaller men down below, the taller ones, just like a ladder. We got them up there, but all this is a labor of love. So they're up there, and this is what unity is all about: cooperation. If your heart is in it, things produce, and they open up, and unbelievingly they open up.
The rocks that are in the pools were all gathered by the congregation from the beaches of Washington. They asked, and we did that for 7 or 8 months, and they were brought here and put into the unfinished part of our building as the building came into being, and colored rocks. And so we hired a woman from Bellevue that did mosaic work, and she laid all of these stones in these as a pattern, and I think you can still see it right down through the center of that. There's a little white line that flows, and we made that with little tiny white pebbles, and that was the pure life of Christ that flows through everyone's soul.
This is Dorothy O'Connor's idea. So she had everybody out scrambling in the river beds and on the seashore picking up rocks, and meticulously they're all laid in a pattern, and they're still out there. and they'll be there for a long, long time.
Well, I have had people to call when I was there serving a prayer line, and within minutes they were called back and said they were healed. Many times. Time and time again. As a matter of fact, this happened to me Friday. A lady called and her baby was ill, and I prayed with her. And within 5 minutes, she called back and said that the baby was all right. Well, unity I know, has helped a lot of people. They've been wanting to sell or buy or travel. And we have prayed together about things like that. Whatever they desire to do, we will pray about it, and then it will work out for them in divine order.
So I like hearing the voices of the past. In particular, a couple of things that comes out after I see that is that practicing beholding the Christ in one another. As Roy said, you work together. You could tell that they enjoyed it, that they were having fun with one another, and also that just the foundation of prayer on which this was built. And that's carried over today. I'm going to be teaching a prayer class in November. It's also a membership class, so if you're interested in becoming a member or deepening your prayer and meditation life, I invite you to join us for that. So the pioneers of the unity movement in this church were border dwellers. New thought has gone mainstream. The Fillmores and the Holmes brothers, they did their job. Swami Vishnu was sent to the West in the mid-60s by his teacher to bring yoga to the West. He wrote one of the first books about yoga exercises called The Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga. Yoga has gone mainstream. He's done his job. And so we are in dire need right now, don't you think, of border dwellers who can reach particularly the inner silence. We need people who can see things differently and don't accept the idea that torturing people is okay. That can't become the conventional wisdom. And when you reach into that place deep within your own being, then you contribute to peace and oneness. And so we need border dwellers who are comfortable with inner space, who are comfortable with prayer and meditation, who are comfortable with the mystical experience, who are comfortable with beholding the Christ. So how do we become border dwellers and embrace the unknown? So, John the Baptist metaphysically represents the intellect. But the truth is the intellect can only take us so far. We need to have an experiential experience of spirit, of God, of love, in order for things to change. When John the Baptist was out teaching, people were asking him, "Are you the Christ?" And he said, "No, I am not. I am preparing the way for the one who is." And he said, "I must decrease while he must increase." And basically, when we look at that metaphysically, what that means is that the intellect must decrease. And does that mean we don't think and we don't use logic? No, but it means that we let it go so that we can increase the presence of Christ within us, so that we can increase the Spirit of God within us, so that we can increase that experience of the divine and the goodness of the universe. So a great example of this is our astronauts. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie The First Man, but it's wonderful. And the thing is, they were using their intelligence to get to the moon, to get to outer space, right? It took some of our best minds to get to the moon, to orbit the moon back in 1968-69. JFK said in 1962, we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And so, we sent our best minds up there. And a man by the name of David Beaver said that, when we originally went to the moon, our total focus was on the moon. We weren't thinking about looking back at the earth. But now that we have done it, that may well be the reason that we went. Because all of a sudden we could see our earth as a planet. And we could see things in a way that we had never seen them before. And here's what a couple astronauts have said. Catherine Sullivan, who was in a space station, no amount of prior study or training can fully prepare anybody for the awe and wonder this inspires. No amount of study or training. I must decrease while the experience must increase. NASA astronaut Gene Cernan said it was one of the deepest, most emotional experiences that he has ever had. And it changed them. The astronauts had an experience. It began in 1968, and it was called the overview effect. And according to Wikipedia, the overview effect is a cognitive shift in awareness that is reported by some astronauts during space flight, often while viewing the Earth from orbit or from the lunar surface. So they come back changed. They come back more altruistic. They come back feeling the oneness and the connectedness. They come back seeking consciousness. Mitchell launched the Noetic Institute to learn more about human consciousness. Rusty Schweikert began practicing transcendental meditation when he came back. So the overview effect elicits a sense of awe in its purest, most intense form. So they went out with their intellect to look, and then they had this incredible experience that woke them up on a whole different level. And the thing is, as they wake up, we wake up, right? Because when one of us is lifted up, we're all lifted up. Now the thing is, does that mean we all have to become astronauts and we have to go to space so that we can become enlightened and we can change the world? No, because we can, yeah, that would be fun though. Guess what? It's your turn to go. Okay, I'm going. We could go to the Grand Canyon. We can climb a mountain. We can watch a sunset. We can go look at the stars. We can look into the eyes of a baby. There's so many experiences that help to trigger that sense of awe. Because when we have this experience of the unknown, it can make us aware of the inherent oneness and demonstrate more inclusive thinking. This is not new. So many of the experiences that the astronauts describe are actually known by Indian mystics for thousands of years, and it's called samadhi. It's that moment when you leave your body, when you are egoless, when you are connected to the divine and you are connected to oneness. Yogananda said that he describes it this way: the soul as the meditator is a state of meditation, and the spirit as the object of meditation all becomes one. The separate wave of the soul meditating in the ocean of spirit becomes merged with spirit. The soul does not lose its identity. So, border dwellers, right? So I know that everyone here is a border dweller, or you wouldn't be here, because you've always thought differently. You've always looked at things different. And so there's a call for us now to really delve deeply into our souls, to delve deeply into our spirits, to delve deeply into the universal goodness that exists. Because as it goes in, it obviously comes out. So let's have a prayer around this and put it into a foundational practice. So I invite you to turn your attention within if you're comfortable doing that. But Jesus said to build your house upon a rock. And so as we come together in prayer, as we come together in this creation of a solid foundation on spirit, on faith, and on God, we know that as the storms brew, as the waves come high, that we are solid. And together we embrace the unknown. We embrace the unknown as border dwellers. For it is in seeing things differently that we become pioneers for change. So I invite you to simply touch your forehead, which represents John the Baptist and the intellect, who said, I must decrease so that the Christ, the divine, may increase. And so move your hand to your heart. So may our minds be in service to love. May our minds be in service to our hearts. And just take a couple deep breaths from your heart space. And this is what must increase. And it is for this awareness that we do give thanks.